Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Sonic Frontiers. Now, I was very public about how awful I thought the early trailers for this game looked, and I'm happy to say I was pleasantly surprised with how the game actually turned out. So, let's just get into it right away. Now, I think the game overall has a lot of great ideas, but the execution is lackluster in a lot of areas. It has wonderful ingredients, but the recipe's a little fucked up, so it ends up tasting a little shitty at points. But overall, I still really enjoyed the meal. So, the big thing with Sonic Frontiers is its open world. Obviously, that was like their main selling point. And it was the most concerning thing for me. From all of the early footage, it looked like a bland, empty, lifeless open world with nothing to do, nothing in it, and then just random obstacles thrown all over the place for some rails to grind and some pads to bounce off of with no rhyme or reason. And now that the game's fully out, I can say with confidence that's exactly what the open world's like. But it's still a lot of fun to play, and I see the potential for the formula here. The worlds are huge, so I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's more than one world. I'll tell you there's at least 3, and they're all pretty similar. They're large, and they just have a ton of haphazardly thrown together boosters that'll take you on like a short little adventure in order to get a memory fragment, which you use to progress the narrative. So you collect these memory fragments by going off of the rails that are throughout the levels, and when you collect enough, you use them on your friends in order to help save them. And on paper, it sounds bad, but playing it, it's really not. I really enjoyed it, especially in the first world. The first world I actually thought was the most fun world, but it is very empty. There's some enemies in there, but not many. There are mini-bosses, though, in these open worlds, and the mini-bosses are very fun to fight. I actually found the combat to be a breakout, joy for me. I thought it was going to be pretty uninspired and pretty boring, but it's not. It's fucking hype. So fighting the mini-bosses was always enjoyable because there's actual mechanics to it. It's not just a DPS check. You can do some fun stuff. There's some fun combos to experiment with. The skill tree's simple. It's quick to finish, but it is enjoyable. So fighting the mini-bosses in the world is the most fun to have in the open world. But yeah, there's not a lot in there, and it also has a huge problem with pop-ins, especially on World 2. Oftentimes with these floating rails and shit, you won't even see them until they're right in front of your fucking face. So you'll be going through like the booster, you hit the bounce pad, and then it seems like there's nothing there until you do a double jump and then some shit pops in. It seems like the game had a really tough time rendering everything at the speed you go. So there's just tons and tons of pop-ins, which is super rough and noticeable when the game open world hinges on you being able to figure out what path you want to take next. It really feels like there wasn't a whole lot of design thought that went into doing these things because they don't really connect to each other. Like you'll go through one of them, you hit the booster, you hit the bounce pad, you jump off a wall, you take another booster, you grind a rail, it sends you through 3 rings and then you get your memory fragment at the end, and it's just you floating above like the open world. And then you come back down to earth. They don't connect to anything, they don't go to anything. Like in most games, there's a rhyme and there's a reason for why things are placed where they are. Here, it just seems like they dumped a ton of these assets all over the place in order to make you farm these memories. And it was fun at first, but by the time you get to like World 3, it really starts to lose its luster and becomes more of a chore. But of course, they're not the only thing in the open world, like I mentioned. There's also a fun progression system where you can even increase things like Sonic's speed, his overall speed, his power, his defense, ring capacity, shit like that, by getting the materials through fighting the mini-bosses or through fighting just normal enemies or finding them in the world. There's even fishing minigame with Big the Cat, which is great. So there is stuff to do in the world, more than I expected based on the early footage, but overall, yes, the open worlds are pretty lifeless, and it does feel pretty uninspired from a design perspective as well. But I don't think it's trash or anything, and I can absolutely see the potential because going fast, like you can collect 400 rings and you get like a fucking turbocharged super boost and you're just going at light speed, fucking Mach 25,000, and you can zip around the map, and it's fun. Like it is super fun to do that. But it's just not fully realized yet, and I do think they can get there in the future as long as they commit to like improving this formula. They got the great groundwork right now. Now, I want to highlight World 3 in particular because I think that's this game at its weakest. World 3 is some of the worst design I've seen in a fucking open world game. There's a bunch of islands that are not connected super well, so you have to go way out of your way to go from one island to the other or find a bird to take you there. And it's just such a fucking headache. It completely puts the brakes on this entire experience and does not go way past cool. It goes way past fucking frustrating. It's miserable to play World 3. It slows everything down, and it is awful. I hated World 3. Everything's too spaced out, and you have to go to very specific paths in order to find the right rails to get where you want to go. And when you're doing like the little exploration stuff for the memories, it'll lock you into the 2D camera perspective so many times, and you can't break out of it until you get out of that little section, the rail section, or that whole area. And that's another complaint. The camera has a mind of its fucking own, and it hates you. The camera wants to make your life as miserable as it can. You are not only fighting enemies in this game, you are fighting this camera. The camera loses its fucking mind, especially starting in World 2. That's when it really started to stand out to me. Now, the highlight of this game, I think, is the cyber worlds. So that's the shit within the open world where once you defeat like a mini boss, you get your portal access and you get the key in order to unlock a cyber world of your choosing that's throughout the world. And that's the more focused traditional Sonic levels. Some of them are 2D, some of them are, full 3D, everything. And they are really fun. There's only like a couple cyber worlds I thought were kind of shitty, and that's only because they were really, really short. Now, they're super forgiving. This game's not a massive challenge by any means, but to get an S rank in a cyber world, you actually have to like try to suck dick in order to fuck it up. The only hard ones to S rank are World 1-1 and 1-2. After that, they just become super, super easy. They're very, very generous. You'll be getting S rank by like 45 seconds. You'll have so much time left over. But that doesn't mean that they're not enjoyable. I think the cyber worlds really stand out, and I liked it a lot. And another big standout to me is the soundtrack. This game's got an amazing soundtrack, especially during their Titan fights, which are their massive boss battles at the end of each world. Those go so fucking hard. Really reminded me of Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance at certain points. It dials up the hype. It's really fun choreography. Sonic goes like fucking Turbo Insano style, murders these Titans while some great metal's playing in the background. They have like screaming, which I didn't expect in a Sonic soundtrack. It was so fun. The Titan fights are amazing, and the soundtrack is just great across the board, especially in the cyber worlds. Another thing that I found really surprising is the depth to the mechanics here. There's a lot of mechanics in order to like traverse, in order to fight. Like there's just a lot that you can master. So there was a lot more depth to this than I was expecting, which I was pleasantly surprised by. Now, I don't know how important the narrative is to Sonic fans, but I will talk about it here because, there's a story, and it's not bad by any means, but it's very standard, what you're expecting kind of story. The power of friendship, I'll do anything for my friends to save everyone. Sonic's got his classic snark, but none of the other characters really get a chance to shine except for a new character named Sage, who is introduced in here as kind of like the antagonist, and I think that character's pretty solid overall, and, Eggman's great, but the story isn't anything that anyone's going to be like writing home about as like a powerful, profound piece, but it allows for really hype moments. It gets you from point A to point B to allow these amazing set pieces in the world, and I think it succeeds at what it wants to do, so I don't think it's bad. I just wanted to like briefly talk about it, that it's nothing super special. But I do like a lot of the callbacks, and there's a bit of fan service in there as well, and I just overall didn't mind it whatsoever, but I don't think it's great either. Plugging Sonic Frontiers into the Moist Meter, I'm giving it a clean 70%. This turned out a lot better than I expected it to. I went in there with very low expectations, and I was very pleasantly surprised. I always approach games with an open mind, even if it's one that I don't think is going to be great, and I'm always happy when it turns out that I'm wrong and the game is good, and that is the case with Sonic Frontiers. It's got a lot of problems. There is a lot of jank. I didn't even mention this. Let me mention it now. The combat when you're fighting a lot of these bosses is fun, but so fucking janky. Sometimes you just shoot across the world for no reason because momentum gets carried in a weird way after you use some of the combos. So the combat gets very, very janky, and with the camera being as unpredictable and shitty as it is, it can just become really nauseating sometimes and lead to some unfortunate deaths that sometimes are just straight up out of your control. So yeah, there's some jank to it, but overall, I do think Sonic Frontiers is a really great attempt at making something special with Sonic. It's not a full, swing and a hit, like knocking it out of the park by any means, but they don't miss here either. There's a lot of execution that's sloppy, but if they stick with something like this, I think they can make something amazing in the future. So I think there's a lot to look forward to for Sonic fans. That's about it. See ya.